Honda S2000. Honda killed the S2000 in 2009, and enthusiasts are still angry about it. This wasn't just another roadster, it was a 9,000 RPM scream wrapped in perfect 50-50 weight distribution. The F20C engine, a 2.0-liter naturally aspirated four-cylinder, produced 240 horsepower. That's 120 horsepower per liter, a figure that remains almost mythical for a naturally aspirated production engine. The car was built to celebrate Honda's 50th anniversary, and engineers were given free rein to create something special. They developed an engine that revved higher than most superbikes. The Redline sat at 9,000 RPM in early models. Drive one hard and the VTEC crossover at 6,000 RPM feels like a second engine kicking in. What made it irreplaceable was the manual transmission, a 6-speed with one of the shortest throws ever fitted to a production car. Shifts took milliseconds. The steering was pure hydraulic, no electronic assistance, giving feedback that modern cars can't replicate. And the chassis balance was so neutral that amateur drivers could rotate the car with just throttle inputs. Honda sold about 66,000 S2000s in North America alone. Decent numbers, but not enough to justify keeping it alive through tightening emissions regulations and the 2008 financial crisis. The company chose to focus on hybrids and practical vehicles instead. Here's what most people don't know. Honda actually tested a turbocharged successor with over 300 horsepower. Internal documents suggest it reached advanced development stages before being canceled. Engineers who worked on the project said it was faster than the original, but lacked the raw mechanical character that made the S2000 legendary. Today, clean examples sell for double their original price. Some low-mileage cars cross six figures at auction. The S2000 has become the poster child for naturally aspirated perfection, and Honda still hasn't built anything quite like it since. Pontiac GTO. General Motors brought back the GTO badge in 2004, and it should have been a home run. Instead, it became one of the most misunderstood muscle cars ever made. The problem wasn't performance, it was packaging and marketing. Under the hood sat a LS 1V8 making 350 horsepower, later upgraded to a LS2 with 400 horses. This was the same powertrain dominating Corvettes and destroying quarter miles across America. 0 to 60 happened in under 5 seconds. The top speed was electronically limited to 155 miles per hour, but it looked like a Pontiac Grand Prix that ate too much. GM made a critical mistake by rebadging the Holden Monaro from Australia instead of designing something distinctly American. Enthusiasts wanted retro styling like the Mustang was getting. They got smooth, understated European lines instead. The car was actually brilliant to drive. Independent rear suspension, near-perfect weight distribution, and a chassis tuned by Holden's performance division made it handle better than any muscle car had a right to. Sales were disastrous. GM projected 18,000 units per year. They sold just over 13,000 in 2004, and numbers dropped every year after. By 2006, it was over. Pontiac itself would be dead by 2010, taking the GTO with it. The tragedy is that people who actually drove the GTO loved it. Magazine tests praised the handling, the power delivery, the surprisingly refined interior. Car and driver called it a wolf in sheep's clothing. Motor Trend compared it favorably to BMW M3s costing twice as much. Production numbers were low enough that the 2004 to 2006 GTO has become a cult classic. Owners modify them heavily because the LS engine accepts power like a sponge accepts water. With simple bolt-ons and a tune, 500 horsepower is easy. The platform can handle over 1,000 with internal engine work. If GM had wrapped that drivetrain in retro sheet metal, the GTO might still exist today. Instead, it's a footnote in Pontiac's collapse and a reminder that badge engineering without understanding your audience leads nowhere. Toyota MR2. Toyota murdered the MR2 in 2007, and mid-engine affordable sports cars died with it. 3 generations spanning 24 years proved that putting the engine behind the driver wasn't just for exotics, it was for everyone. The first generation, called the AW11, arrived in 1984 looking like a baby Ferrari. Pop-up headlights, wedge shape, and a 1.6-liter engine mounted sideways behind the seats. It weighed barely 2,300 pounds. Toyota even offered a supercharged version making 145 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much until you remember the weight. Power-to-weight ratio was similar to contemporary Porsches. The second generation SW20 got serious. Toyota dropped in a turbocharged 2.0-liter making over 200 horsepower in some markets. The design became curvier, more aggressive, but it gained a reputation for snap oversteer. Lift off the throttle mid-corner, and the back end would come around violently. Toyota revised the suspension multiple times, but the car's nervous handling became legendary. The third generation, ZZW30, went the opposite direction. Smaller, lighter, Boxster-inspired styling. No turbo, just a 1.8-liter making 138 horsepower. Purists called it underpowered, but it weighed just 2,195 pounds and came with a manual transmission and a perfectly balanced chassis. It was a momentum car that rewarded smooth driving over brute force. Sales never justified the engineering complexity. Building a mid-engine car costs more than a front-engine layout. Toyota was selling maybe 7,000 units per year in the US by the end. Meanwhile, the company was pivoting hard toward SUVs and hybrids. The MR2 became a casualty of changing priorities. What killed it wasn't just sales, it was the realization that most buyers didn't want the compromises a mid-engine layout demands. Tiny trunk space, engine heat cooking the cabin, expensive repairs. More practical sports cars like the Mazda MX-5 offered 90% of the fun with none of the hassle. But here's what Toyota didn't anticipate. The market for lightweight, analog sports cars would explode a decade later. Today, people are building replicas and swapping in modern engines. Clean SW20 turbos sell for serious money, and enthusiasts still beg Toyota to bring back a modern version, even though it'll probably never happen. Dodge Viper. Dodge killed the Viper in 2017, ending 25 years of the most unhinged supercar America ever produced. The Viper wasn't about sophistication or technology. It was about taking an 8.4-liter V10 engine and wrapping just enough car around it to make it legal. The original RT10 arrived in 1992 with 400 horsepower and no traction control, no ABS, no airbags, and no roof. It would kill you if you weren't paying attention. Side exhaust pipes ran close enough to the door sills that they could burn your leg getting out. The car was raw, terrifying, and completely addictive. Over 5 generations, the Viper evolved, but never lost its savage character. The final generation made 645 horsepower from an engine producing more displacement than some city buses. 0 to 60 took 3.3 seconds. It could hit 206 miles per hour. And it still came with a manual transmission as standard because the Viper was never about making things easy. Sales were always small. Dodge moved maybe 2,000 units per year in good times, far less in bad. By 2017, new safety regulations requiring side curtain airbags would have forced major redesigns. Meanwhile, Dodge was being absorbed into Fiat Chrysler, and the money wasn't there. The Viper was canceled quietly. No farewell tour, just 5 final special editions and then silence. What most people don't realize is how much racing pedigree the Viper built. The GT-SR dominated GT racing in the late 1990s, winning Le Mans multiple times. That success validated the car's engineering and proved it wasn't just straight-line muscle. The Viper could turn and brake with European exotics. Today, the Viper occupies a unique space. Too extreme for most buyers, too pure for modern regulations, too expensive to produce in small numbers. It was a car that only made sense when companies were willing to lose money for the sake of brand image. Those days are mostly over. Clean examples are appreciating rapidly. The final ACR models, track-focused monsters with massive wings and aggressive aero, are already collectible. Some have sold at auctions for over $200,000. Dodge keeps teasing a return, but it seems unlikely. Modern supercars need hybrid systems and advanced electronics. The Viper was the opposite of that philosophy. It was pushrod V10 Fury with barely any computers in between, and that made it perfect.